would like to introduce a couple of members of our board that are here. Dr. Pankow, Christine Pankow, she is the Associate Director of the Seismograph Stations, U of U Seismograph Stations. Rob Snow is with us. He is a consulting geotechnical engineer. And Professor Bartlett is here. Many of you know him. He is an associate professor in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department. And Professor Yaud is also on our board of directors, and he is our incoming president, next year's president. I think you're in for a bit of a treat this evening. We are very, very fortunate in having two of the most well-known and highly respected individuals in the seismic arena, if that's the right word to use. They're both internationally known. We asked them if they could join us this evening and basically share with us what they know. Tell us a little bit about themselves, about their history, about what they have accomplished, and what they see in the future in terms of seismology and earthquake engineering. Really want to encourage you folks to ask questions. The whole purpose of this and why we're calling it a roundtable is because we really want all of you to kind of ask questions. These gentlemen know an awful lot, many, many years of experience, and they're willing to share that with us all. We've asked Professor Bartlett to actually moderate the meeting, so I'm going to turn the time over to him, and he'll kind of do introductions and get us going.
Thanks, Peter. So I think the way this format's going to go is I'll make an introduction to Dr. Arabasz, and then we'll let him give a brief I'll give a brief bio sketch, and then he'll give kind of a synopsis of his career and background. And then we'll do likewise with Dr. Yaud, and they've prepared some short presentations when they make their kind of synopsis. Then after that's over, I think we'll have a better context, about their careers and what they do. Now, and then we'll open up more to a round table. What do you call it? Not a round table. Question and answer type of format. And I would encourage you that, technical questions are fine because there are, those of the technical community. But also because these are people that spent a long time in their career doing both science and engineering, I think questions about anything you want about career advancement, public policy, who's going to win the next BYU Utah game, those kind of things are not off limits. So I'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Arabasz, and then we'll let him do his presentation. So Dr. Arabasz has a BS degree from Boston College. He also has an MS degree and PhD from California Institute of Technology. Graduated in 1971 with that PhD degree, and then started working, looks like here in 1974, as a seismologist. So what did you do in the 3 years between there, Walter? Oh, okay, good enough. I hope it's not working at Burger King, but he also is became the director of the U of U Seismo Stations in 1985 and held that position till most recently in 2010. His interest obviously seismology, earthquake hazard analysis. Got involved in the mining-induced seismicity. Probably Crandall Mine was one of the most important ones, but maybe others. And then also, being a scientist is interested in tectonics and seismicity of the West. When I think about Walter, I think about also his involvement in the public arena. He's done quite a lot of things in that realm. Certainly here he's received the Utah Governor's Medal for Science and Technology. He's received the USGS's John Wesley Powell Award in 2007, and then the Western States Seismic Policy Council, WSPIC as we call it, Award, Lifetime Achievement Award in 2008. And he retired in 2010, but he tells us, at least when we're out in the hall, he's just as busy as ever. And I'm sure he's probably continuing to do things related to his illustrious career. So with that, Walter will give you whatever time you need, and then we'll go to that point.
I have my microphone on if you need a check. Okay. Okay, let's see. You'll need to help me find my PowerPoint, Steve.
Excuse me, sorry. There we go. And this, you can just roll that if you want in advance, or just click the page down button.
Okay. This would be me. And my premise here is that this was really a mentoring opportunity to provide some advice, some words of wisdom from my career. I'll just give some relevant parts of my story, mention a few things I've learned, and then comment on making a difference in seismic safety. How I got here to Utah, and in part to answer Steve's question. I was born in Acushnet, Massachusetts. This is where Titleist golf balls were made. That's where the hospital is, across the river from New Bedford, a larger city where Ahab and Ishmael begin their journey chasing Moby Dick. Went to Boston College, entered as an English major, took a course in geology. Actually, they told me that I would have to take geology as a science requirement. And at that time, earth science was not taught in high schools. I had to go to a dictionary and learn what geology was all about. I encountered a professor who was developing a department of geology, and after my first midterm exam, he called me into his office, asked me what I wanted to do with my life. I said 6 things, and he showed me how every one of those things was compatible with a career in geology. From geology, went to Caltech, primary emphasis on structural geology, but my thesis advisor happened to be the acting director of the Caltech Seismolab, so I began hanging out at the Seismolab because that's where my thesis advisor was. Got interested in seismology, did some microearthquake research with Jim Brune, went to Chile, had a happy graduate career because I spent 1.5 years of it in Chile off the Caltech campus. This was cool. My thesis was the geology and geophysics of the Atacama Fault Zone. After I finished that, I got a 3-year postdoc from the New Zealand government, worked at the New Zealand Seismological Observatory, and started a program of microearthquake field studies. This was the first work with portable seismographs that had been done in New Zealand. From there, I went to Lamont Observatory, part of Columbia University, for about 10 months before a job opened up here at the University of Utah. And I've spent my time here eventually as a research professor and director of the University of Utah Seismograph stations. There are some interconnected threads here. As a research faculty member, my career was not a typical one of a university professor with a teaching schedule, and with my responsibilities, administrative responsibilities for directing the seismograph stations. My research interest here I've identified with network seismology being a primary one. And from that path that I showed you earlier, what I should point out is that my entree to seismology was in what I will call observational seismology rather than theoretical seismology. At Caltech, my interests in active faulting were naturally related to earthquake studies, with my minor in geophysics, taking some seismology courses at Caltech, and then in New Zealand moving completely into observational seismology. This was my niche when I came here to Utah. I also became involved in a number of consulting projects, 38 of them since 1977, in earthquake hazards and risks for dams, nuclear facilities, and other critical structures, and PSHA, probabilistic seismic hazard analysis methodology. My public policy work chiefly focusing on network seismology and earthquake risk reduction. From my work in the public policy arena and in consulting, as I reviewed this, this commonality that became very evident, and something that I remember with fondness over this time, was the extensive collaboration with engineers and earthquake professionals. For the Bureau of Reclamation, over a 12-year period, there were worked on a consulting board with Ralph Peck and Dick Johns until his death. This was my first experience with an interdisciplinary consulting board, and it was just an incredibly rewarding experience to be schooled by seasoned professionals, Ralph Peck of Terzaghi and Peck fame, and Dick Johns, a famous engineering geologist, originally from Caltech and then more recently at Stanford. In the mid-'80s, I had the opportunity to be involved with a methodology development team working for, the contract was under the Electric Power Research Institute. This was developing a methodology for probabilistic seismic hazard analysis for the central and eastern United States to establish over the whole central and eastern United States for nuclear power plant siting a uniform base of seismic hazard assessment. And there, one of the all-stars was Alan Cornell, and it was just an incredible opportunity to basically have a ringside seat watching experts in probability and statistics developing the methodology for PSHA, and then also the methodologies for eliciting expert opinion, what later came to be known as the SHAC process after the Senior Seismic Hazard Analysis Committee. This is a standard methodology for assessing earthquake hazards for nuclear facilities. Yucca Mountain, I was involved over a number of years. Here, my favorite story is to observe the interaction between engineers, scientists, and regulators. The engineers, with their pragmatic bent, their confidence and bravado, basically saying, give me a number and I'll design that bugger. And the scientists, on the other hand, mired in complexity, knowing full well that the Earth is very complicated and can't be simplified, and just involved interminably in dealing with uncertainty and the complexity of the Earth science issues. And the regulator then intervenes, and this is really fascinating. The regulator can't provide any assurance of perfect safety, which one would expect from the engineer, nor assurance of perfect understanding, which is what you're expecting from the scientist. And the engineer, with the power, with the force of law, just intervenes and cuts through the Gordian knot and says, this is how it will be. And that's the resolution to the problem. With Los Alamos and with the Department of Energy, a number of years reviewing seismic hazard and facility design at Los Alamos. And then over a 5-year period, most recently, a program sponsored by EPRI, again, Electric Power Research Institute, Department of Energy, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, developing a seismic source characterization for the entire central and eastern United States, and also ground motion prediction through that domain. On the public policy side, implementing NEHRP in Utah and nationally, building a state earthquake program, creating the Utah Seismic Safety Commission, modernizing seismic monitoring in Utah, and advocacy, planning, and development of an advanced national seismic system. And here, through all of these efforts, again, involvement with engineers and other professionals. What I've learned, personal, I'll start here. We are each our own measure. I learned this running around the field house on the university campus, and it occurred to me one day that I couldn't compare my time to people 10 and 20 years younger than me, And I thought to myself, okay, we are each our own measure. And in terms of mentoring or modeling, if you're young and looking at older people for role models, I'd say think before you try to imitate or select a role model, because we each indeed are our own measure, and more importantly, we're each gifted with particular and different talents for some greater good. What this amounts to, I think, is that with the right circumstances and opportunities, we each create our own niche rather than fall into some cookie-cutter mold that's been prepared before us. Being creative demands some understanding of how your brain works and learning how to sneak past the internal censoring critic in your brain. This goes back to a time when people more standardly talked in terms of left brain, right brain. I don't think neuroscientists do that anymore, but in a simplified way, I think of it as the left brain where all of the inner dialogue is coming from. This is your logical and importantly your censoring part of the brain as opposed to your right intuitive part of the brain. And the name of the game is to sneak past that censoring critic early in the morning, or ideally those morning hours are really, really valuable. There are techniques called mind mapping where you can go through more free-form thinking without going through a sequential, logical sequence of thinking. And a point here, the arc of your career and your life, I really believe, hinges on your integrity and credibility. If you're young, Google the top quality sought by employers, and you'll find integrity, honesty right near the top of the list. But this will be an interesting exercise for anyone seeing, after all of the classes that you take, perhaps in engineering or science, and what's drilled into you, and then look over the fence and see what employers are really looking for. Yes, the technical part, but there are a lot of other qualities that are equally important. Among the things I've learned continuing, habits can be your best friend or certainly your worst enemy. Pay attention to time management, goal setting, and self-discipline. One of the best things I did early in my career was to take a course, a short course in time management and goal setting. I was in college and I read this by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it just seared in my brain. I've never forgotten it. Every man is as lazy as he dares to be. So if we're each our own measure, this is the default, and we start from there. In this modern day and age, busyness, I am busy, you are busy, they are busy, we are busy. You constantly hear about busyness. And I was fascinated when I heard Thomas More, and this is a contemporary philosopher, say, busyness is a story we tell ourselves. I'll leave that to you to think about. And then a quote that I've had in my office through all of my career here in Utah: it is not enough to be busy. The question is, what are we busy about? I've already mentioned this, my belief that scientists are engineers and engineers are different from birth. I believe that. Scientists, again, or engineers, easier to characterize for me, as pragmatic, problem-solving oriented, and from my observation, accompanied by this confidence. And that's what really is required as you go out into the world and solve problems or deal with people. I've thought about going to a doctor's office, and whether the doctor really knows what he's talking about, I am assured if he tells me confidently how things are, and I will always be more anxiety-ridden if the doctor appears uncertain. So there's a lot to be said for confidence, but clearly it has to be tempered. And from my experience, which has been richly rewarding, this interaction with scientists and engineers, if you find yourself in solely an engineering world, at least in the earthquake arena, understand that there's an interface between science and engineering, and you need to have some understanding, if you're an engineer, of some of the science on the other side of that interface, and vice versa. And if you find yourself in any professional capacity on committees relating to public policy, you will have this experience of encountering differing points of view from social scientists, from engineers, from earth scientists, seismologists, geologists, and you can see how people with their different backgrounds and perspectives come and bring richly different perspectives to the problem. And from one of my own mentors, he said very definitely to me, if you want to go into the public policy arena, first and foremost, be a good scientist or an engineer. And this really comes down to the issue of credibility. And just a couple more, and then I'll let you come up here, Les. Among the things I've learned relating to earthquake public policy, I firmly believe that the state jurisdiction is the preeminent framework for engaging public officials. It's where the rubber hits the road at the local, county, and state levels. Congressional delegations, governors, and state legislatures will more readily buy into and support a state earthquake program than a regional consortium or a national earthquake initiative. Now, if you think about NEHRP, the National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program, and the effort and energy that goes into it, with the end of making a difference in the real world, my claim is that you can be in a room with NEHRP professionals and talk till the cows come home, and nothing will get done until you come into the local level to really implement the policies and the whatever actions are desirable for earthquake risk reduction. And then this also hit home with me when I became an advocate approaching Congress for funding the Advanced National Seismic System or developing the Advanced National Seismic System. Here too, the more important thing was to come back to Utah and focus energies on building a state earthquake program for these reasons that I've outlined right here. And then all of my experience in public policy making, whether dealing with our state legislature, Congress, private sector decision makers, or the public, tells me that earthquake safety advocates have to be willing to play the long game. If you're young, I have to tell you right up front, few successes will come quickly unless you're really, really lucky. If you happen to hit a cycle where it's a surplus funding year, or if for whatever reason you strike gold. Otherwise, the norm will be that whatever you chase will take a long time and may take years or sometimes decades. And then finally, if you want to make a difference in seismic safety, the National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program, well structured with the agency partners, NIST, FEMA, USGS, and NSF, National Institute of Science and Technology, the lead agency in NEHRP, Federal Emergency Management Agency, U.S. Geological Survey, and National Science Foundation. Plugging into professional societies, EERI, Seismological Society of America, American Society of Civil Engineers, clearly ready-made opportunities and guidance for engaging your energy and any contributions you are willing to make. And in Utah, I would strongly say to you, join efforts with the Utah Seismic Safety Commission and Utah State Earthquake Program. And the last shameless plug, EERI, hello, the Utah chapter of EERI is here for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. So next I'll give a brief introduction to Dr. Youde. In fact, he sent me an email and suggested to me that I don't read his bio sketch because he's incorporated that into his presentation. So he said, say whatever you want about Dr. Youde. So I'll tell him a somewhat funny story that I don't think he even really knows happened. We received, I think in 1989, funding to go to Alaska to do some surveying, and some of it was to look at a landslide that occurred just outside of Anchorage in a place called Turnagain Heights. And then also we were doing some surveying along the Alaska Railroad and that looking at getting the depths of channels and the topography around some of these channels, mainly for supporting my graduate work, which was doing lateral spread analysis. So we had survey equipment with us. At the time, it was a state-of-the-art equipment. It had essentially a theodolite with an electronic distance meter mounted on it. And the other graduate student had done some surveying, so he was the surveyor. He ran the instrument, and of course, I was the rodman, so I got to go out, and scare all the bears out of the bush. But anyway, one morning we kind of got a late start because we were in Alaska for 2.5 weeks, almost 2.5 weeks or so, at least 2 weeks. In the summertime, we were just, and it's important to realize we were there just after the summer solstice, so we were there in probably early to mid-July is my recollection. And so, we had a lot of daylight during those times. But we got a late start one morning. We were surveying north of Anchorage near the Knik and Matanuska rivers, and it was raining a little bit lightly, so we couldn't bring out the survey equipment. So we had breakfast, and I think it didn't stop raining until about 10 a.m. So we started surveying after that, and we went up on these rivers, and we've been working all day long, and I looked in a while, it's 8 p.m. It still looks like it's 4 in the afternoon. And I found, I couldn't get too far away from the survey gun, so I came over to Scott and I said, it's 8 o'clock, I'm hungry because we hadn't eaten all day. I says, where's Dr. Youde? And he says, well, we're quite a ways away from the bridges. He said, well, he went back over to the bridges to measure, we were measuring how much the bearing plates had displaced. As the liquefaction occurred, it displaced those bridges, and some of them moved on their bearing plates. So he went back over to see if he could make some measurements on how much, this bridge had shifted on its bearing plates, it was like 2.5 miles back over there and that. And so Scott and I looked at our watch. Well, we can make it to Palmer and eat at McDonald's in about 10 minutes. So we took off. We got our stomachs full, and we came back, and he was still over there. I think about a half hour later after we got back, he came back. It must have been probably 10 o'clock at night. And so that just tells you how hard a worker Dr. Youde is. Even though his graduate students didn't work quite as hard as he did, we worked pretty hard. Anyway, so that's fond memories. In fact, we get to go to Alaska again this summer, so it's going to be fun because it's the 50th anniversary of the 1964 Alaska earthquake. And EERI and it's the National Earthquake Conference is going to be held in Anchorage. I think it's in July is my recollection. Yeah, okay, July 24. That's an easy day to remember. So if any of you get a chance, come up and join us in Anchorage. But I'll turn the time over to you, Dr. Youde, and let you introduce your topic.
And then I'm going to take the opportunity to summarize Walt's lecture to you very, very, very succinctly. This is a joke that Bill Joyner told to me, so you remember Bill Joyner. There was a company that needed to hire a new employee, and they had their choice of either using an engineer, a geologist, or a geophysicist. And so they put out an advertisement. They had one application from each. So the interviewer took them into a room and he said, I just have one question for you. What is 2 + 2? The engineer went first. And he gets out his calculator and punches in the number. He says, 4.999. 3.999, call it 4. And then he brought in the geologist. And then the same thing. One question for you. What is 2 plus 2? The geologist scratched his head and he said, well, it's somewhere between 2 and 7. And if you've worked with a geologist, that's about as closely as you can pin them down. And then he called in the geophysicist. And he said, one question for you. What is 2 plus 2? And the geophysicist leaned across the table and says, what answer do you want? And if you work with geophysicists, you can get just about any answer that you want. Okay, then the damage there. So let's get into the. Use the page down. These work too, don't they? Yeah. So let's get into it. It's Meet the Mentors. So as with Walt, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my history and give you some advice. And you'll see there's a lot of commonality in what we have to say. But a little bit about my career. Started out graduating, well, a farmer in Lake Shore, Utah, if you know where that's out on the south side of Utah Lake. Graduated from Spanish Fork High School and went to BYU to school. Didn't have high goals when I started, but I did get an education at BYU, got a BES degree in civil engineering. The E means it's a Bachelor of Engineering Science, which means it was a 5-year program at the time. And then I had the opportunity, received a fellowship from Iowa State University to go back to Iowa and work on a graduate program. I really didn't have a goal of getting a PhD when I went, but the fellowship paid my tuition, gave me $600 a year for research and $200 a month for living expenses, with an extra little bit because I was married and had dependents. And that was enough to get by in Iowa. So I went into my major professor to talk to him about what I might do there. And when he found out that I had a little bit of research money with me, their main research was putting lime and cement in the ground to try to make it harder and stronger for building highways. He said, we want you to do something new. Why don't you do something in soil dynamics? So soil dynamics was a fairly new field at the time. There was nobody at Iowa State that had any training in soil dynamics. I said, sure, I'll give it a try. So anyway, I worked in soil dynamics and basically did my research by putting a direct shear apparatus on a shaking table and measuring the properties of soil under vibration. And then when I graduated, I started looking for a job. And had offers from 3 universities, I think it was, and the U.S. Geological Survey. And the U.S. Geological Survey was looking for somebody with some experience in granular soils and particularly something in dynamics. And so I managed to get a job with the Geological Survey. And I'm going to follow up on that just a little bit later. Through my career, I've been able to do a number of things. And from that, I've gotten a number of honors. I'm a member of the National Academy of Engineering, which is a very elite group. Maybe 1 in 10,000 engineers make it into that group. I'm a distinguished member of the American Society of Civil Engineers. Again, there's about 11 or 12 inducted each year into that group. Honorary member of the Earthquake Engineering Society. Received the H. Bolton Seed Medal from ASCE, and back to my alma mater. A couple of years ago, they gave me the Professional Achievement Award in Engineering, PACE, and ticket to the homecoming football game and a sweatshirt, and so I have that award as well. So my career from 1967 to 1984, I was research engineer with the U.S. Geological Survey. And you can't go to California, be interested in soil dynamics, and stay out of earthquakes for very long. So I was brought into the earthquake program, and liquefaction was just a new thing at that time. We didn't know much. Well, we knew what liquefaction was prior to 1964, but didn't know it had any particular importance in engineering. But this 1964 Alaska earthquake and the 1964 Niigata earthquake both had spectacular effects of liquefaction, which just turned the profession around, and major research ensued. So I got involved in that almost on the ground floor. And then mid-career, an opening it opened up at BYU, and that was my alma mater. And so we were quite interested coming back to Utah, and so I took a position in the faculty at BYU, and was there for 19 years. And again, many opportunities came my way through BYU. And so some of the things I've done, I've conducted post-earthquake reconnaissance investigations following 20 major earthquakes on 5 continents. Led the U.S. engineering research team to Turkey in 1999, and also led a team in Japan well, that's 1993 in Hokkaido and 1999 in Turkey. One of the things that I realized was needed and that I could do better at the Geological Survey than professors could in their short-term research programs was to do subsurface investigations at sites affected by liquefaction and instrument sites to see what happens during future earthquakes where liquefaction could occur. And from that, just to brag a little bit, the instrumental records from the wildlife site in Imperial County, California, that I led the instrumentation of in 1982, was triggered in 1987 by an earthquake that generated complete liquefaction at the site. So these are first and so far the only recordings that track ground motions and pore water pressures as liquefaction occurs in the field. In terms of accomplishment with students such as Steve, developed techniques for mapping liquefaction hazard, evaluated liquefaction resistance. So this is a workshop that I held or organized in 1996. If publications come out in 1997 and 2001. And with Steve, predicting lateral spread displacements. These are techniques that are used quite worldwide, universally, in earthquake engineering. And have authored or co-authored more than 160 papers. My current state is I'm retired, at least Social Security thinks so. But I continue research and writing. I work on a number of consulting projects, very much like Walt. And right now I am pretty busy with some consulting projects. And then I'm involved in many professional committees and volunteer reviews for papers and so on. Okay, now a little bit of the advice. Keys to success, and this is looking back over my experience and saying what gave me the ability to accomplish what I've accomplished. And the first thing is motivation. This is something that's intrinsic within us. It's kind of hard for me to look back and say what really motivated me, other than my father was a major influence. And my father also grew up in Spanish Fork, Utah, out in Lake Shore. And due to circumstances that outside of his control, he never graduated from high school. But he was motivated. He would love to have gone on and got more education. But he was drafted into the Army in World War I and did other things and never did. And of course, without having a high school graduation, it was difficult but he always was motivated. And when I came along, I knew, although my father never preached to me, I knew he would be very disappointed in me if I didn't take advantage of my opportunities to learn which were denied to him. So that was one of the things that motivated me. But there's something deep down in that motivates people. Because I've met many people, high school students, college students, who I thought were equally as smart and talented as me, but didn't have the motivation to continue on. Education, that's just essential. And so let's talk a little bit about education. And my opinion is one will never regret getting more education. One may eventually regret not getting enough education, but they'll never regret getting too much education that I've seen. So what do we do with education? Well, let's look at a BS degree. BS degree is a basic technical degree, but it gives you no specialization. So if you stop at the end of a BS degree, there are things you can do, and there's a lot of need for it, but they're not at the higher levels of engineering or science. So an MS degree is essential, again, in civil engineering, particularly geotechnical engineering, because we can't give students enough specialization in a BS degree to call themselves a geotechnical engineer. So an MS degree is a specialization degree. And it's required. If you have a MS degree, you know the basic principles of engineering, and you can do design, fairly complicated designs, but all of these things have been done before. You just learn the skills to be able to continue doing it. Whereas a PhD degree is a research degree. And so in a PhD degree, you're taught to do research, to solve problems, understand problems, work through solutions that haven't been solved before. And so if you're going to look for a job in teaching or research, a PhD is essential. But I have met many, and there are many PhDs in the consulting world. You probably all know some. They are very successful, but again, they usually migrate to the problems that haven't been solved before, the new things that have to be done. So it's essentially to get a good education and get as much as you can. Now, you also have to have some luck in life, and I define luck as opportunity meeting preparation. So, by going to Iowa State University, I had got good enough grades and was prepared, didn't have a goal to get there, but when the opportunity came, then I was lucky enough to take advantage of that opportunity. And the same in going to the Geological Survey. I never had any idea of getting into earthquakes in my pre-USGS days. Hardly even knew what they were. But I had the preparation. The courses I took at Iowa State prepared me very well for a career at USGS. And so when the opportunity came, and as I say, I had 3 or 4 job offers at universities, I called the department chair at BYU and listed out the job offers that I had, and I said, "What's your advice?" And he didn't even bat an eyeball. He said, "Take the research job. You can always go from research into teaching, you can go from research into consulting. But if you don't get a fundamental experience in research, it's pretty hard to go the other way around." So the next is integrity. Walt hit on this. Now, my religious principles require a high level of integrity. Not sure I'll live up to them all, but it requires it. But I found in my experience at the Geological Survey, working day after in and day out with scientists, primarily geologists and geophysicists and earth scientists, that there is a very high level of integrity required, demanded of scientists. And you cannot slip up. I know of one example, I didn't see it, but I've heard people talk about it firsthand, of the Geological Survey hiring a new PhD graduate out of a major university in the marine geology area, which is, well, I was in Menlo Park, our group was housed with the marine geologists, so I got to know them well. And they hired this PhD. They put him out on a ship doing sub-bottom profiling, I think it was in San Francisco Bay. And out of this, I can't give his motivation, but he fudged the data to make it fit either what should have come out or some theory that he had, but he fudged the data. Now, he was clever enough to fudge the data, but he wasn't clever enough to make it so that it wasn't obvious to the experts that was going to review his work that he'd fudged the data. And he was terminated, his reputation was ruined, he was finished as a scientist. There's just, there's a lot of cheating, I understand, goes on in college and so on. But you cannot cheat when you get into high levels of engineering and science. It's just not allowed. Okay, professional involvement. Walt's hit upon that. It's mostly unpaid. Essential to establishing contacts and building personal networks. That's what happened to me by getting involved in the Soil Dynamics Committee of ASCE. Tremendous contacts that I made in that committee. And provides personal and professional benefits. Okay, so that's my pitch on advice to you. So I will turn it back to Steve to moderate and get back to the roundtable part. We're almost got our time shot already, but we started late.
Oh, we have at least a half hour.
We'll let Steve moderate this next part of the program.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Yant. So we're taping this back here, and it will be available on YouTube later on, and so you can watch this again, and just don't watch me because I get self-conscious. But anyway, what I'd like to do is, as you ask your questions, because it is being recorded, we need to have you ask the questions through the microphone so that is transmitted up to the camera. So just let me come to you and hand you the mic and stand up and ask your question. You can address it to any member of the panel. And again, anything I think is fair game here, pretty much, whether it's career advice, whatever you want to ask, or if you want to ask them a sticky technical question just to see if they can answer it, that's fine too. Okay? So, if we would, why don't you just state your name too as you do this?
My name is John Mancini, and this question is for Dr. Arabasz. You talked about confidence being an important part of being a technical professional. I wonder if you might describe to us at what point in your career did you feel confident in the work that you were doing, and how did you achieve that?
Being a perfectionist by temperament, I don't think I've reached it yet. I have to work hard to understand something to my satisfaction, and I'm basically, I would characterize my personality as mild-mannered, and probably would fall short on conveying confidence in some arena. Well, I know I can recall a failing in this regard, and this was in a hearing before. It was related to a nuclear regulation hearing, and one of the judges basically characterized my assessment as being from someone who understood what he didn't know. And this contrasted with a lawyer from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission who, in my opinion, just had this bluster and bravado that probably carried the argument in that case. It's a delicate question. And it comes back to this issue of, I guess, a scientist is allowed to remain in a realm of being a truth seeker, pursuing an answer to his satisfaction, whether he's able to arrive at some understanding and, first of all, convey it competently. That's a relatively easy part. But being able to persuade others of the merit of his argument. Self-analysis, I'd probably say that I never did reach that point to my satisfaction. And I don't know any other way to answer that.
I might chip in a little bit. Self-confidence I don't think is something we're born with. I certainly wasn't. And I wasn't, I don't think, terribly self-confident in the early part of my career. But something happened to me in 1975. I managed to find a way with the Geological Survey to take a sabbatical leave and spent one academic year studying at Imperial College in London. And if you lined up the top 50 people in my profession in that era, probably 3 or 4 of them were at Imperial College. So I was put in with a number of these people. Now I took the Master of Science course at Imperial College. They enrolled 30 students. We each had a desk in what they called a drawing room. And then, we took the courses. And from that, I got to know at least 2 or 3 of these people personally. One of them was Nick Ambrazes. Nick is one of my role models. Nick went out in his earlier days and did post-earthquake investigations after almost every earthquake in the Mideastern part of the world for probably a 20-year period. And he just gained a wealth of understanding and knowledge that he could share. So I enjoyed, and I got to know Nick very personally. Alan Bishop, whom anybody that's taken geotechnical would recognize the name. I got to know Bishop very personally, sat down and talked to him for probably many hours while I was there. And when in fact, I'm writing my life's history right now. And when I've gone over this, I said, what did I get out of the year I spent at Imperial College? Well, I went with kind of 2 objectives in mind. One was to develop better procedures for sampling sands, which Bishop had done some work on, and to get an MS degree. You see, I went straight from a bachelor's to a PhD. When you saw my list of education, there's no Master of Science in it. So I thought, here's my chance. I'll fill in those letters. And halfway through the program, the amount of academic things I had to do, writing laboratory reports for soils tests, which never seemed to work out right, just killed me. And I said, I could write a whole paper at the USGS for the work I'm putting into writing one of these dumb laboratory reports. So I checked out of the Master of Science program. They had a booby prize called the Diploma of Imperial College, DIC, and you'll see that behind people's names, which is fairly prestigious in at least the English world. And to do that, I had to write a dissertation. Well, that never got done either. So I came home, but the Geological Survey had no requirements that I do any of these things. I was there to get advanced training. So I came home without any degrees. I hadn't developed a better procedure for sampling soils. But what I had developed by these close associations with these giants of the profession, all of a sudden I realized they weren't that much different than me. They were very humble people. They didn't know everything, just as you saw with Walt. Now, there's a lot of things Walt knows and probably better than anybody else. But he doesn't know everything. And these guys are all that way. They know there's problems that they haven't resolved. And so just by associating with them When I wrote my history, I said the most important thing I got out of it was self-confidence, that I could talk to the leaders of the profession, to anybody, and they're just common people like me, and it's given me a lot of confidence to do a lot of the things that they've done. But it is an essential ingredient to success, is to have self-confidence. Now, that's a long answer to a question. We better get on to another one.
Just to put a fine point on that, I think there is a seasoning that comes from experience, clearly. And in Les's case, the opportunity to chase earthquakes around the world and having made observations in the aftermath of a number of earthquakes. I mean, there comes a point with time and what I've termed as seasoning that helps develop confidence.
Great, appreciate your comments. My name is Ryan Ma, and the question that I had for our panel tonight was, how do you, as a young professional, how do you get involved in public policy where you haven't obtained that expert status? What steps are in that, and how would you accomplish that in our modern day?
Sounds like one for you, Walt.
Assuming that you've developed some confidence in in some specialty, let's say engineering, what I would say is attend meetings of the Utah Seismic Safety Commission and observe problems that arise and where you might have some relevant expertise to apply. Typically what will happen is that committees will be formed, often on an ad hoc basis. The structural engineers, let's see, what area of engineering are you?
Geotech.
Geotech, okay. What was the question for you after all, Les? But what you'd find is that ad hoc committees would be formed, and this allows association with other specialists, and then progressively you start to understand that, hey, I have something to contribute. I have some expertise, knowledge, experience that's relevant, and the pathway seems to start from there. In the geotechnical world, do you have some advice?
Well, I agree with Walt, and I skipped over some things in my key things to work on to achieve. And one of them was get experience. And I think I said it's more important in your first job to look at the experience you're going to get rather than the salary that you're going to get, because without experience and gaining some realm of expertise, well, if you gain that, then you're marketable. Then to get into the public arena, get involved. I think and Walt's a splendid model of that. Get involved. Get into professional associations, see what the problems are. And something that I'm not too good at is volunteering, but I think Walt must, because he was one of the ones that helped us get the Seismic Safety Commission established in the state of Utah, and I don't think they paid him well for that. I expect you volunteered with
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember. Can't get her name to come quickly. But anyway, he was part of a group that pushed this through the legislature. A tremendous thing.
Probably, I think a relevant point here, from my observation in the engineering realm, is affiliation with EERI, and that affords an opportunity for interactions with other professionals. Beginning here with the Utah chapter, but with an opportunity to attend the annual meetings. And maybe you can carry this in terms of how the networking or developing personal contacts would evolve under the EERI framework. Without question, in my mind, among the professional societies in the earthquake arena, the EERI is the best organized and the most effective organization because of its resources.
Anyway, yeah, it's just a matter of getting involved. But you need to get the experience, the expertise, so that when you are involved, And a lot of it is to volunteer. So when you see these opportunities come up, get involved and take a leadership role, and it won't take long. Anybody that's willing to take on major assignments in the public area, they're in short supply. You will have the opportunities.
Hi, my name is Ben Fowler. I was wondering, what are you both contributed a great amount into your professions and into this modern day. What are your fears for the professions you're in and going forward, and what are your concerns?
I'll go first on this one since you've gone first on all the others. Well, there's a lot of fears. One is, particularly in the earthquake arena, we don't have really good answers to a lot of questions yet. We've made progress, but we've got a lot of things that's got to be worked on, and we've got to get better procedures to do things, and so there's a lot of progress that needs to be made there. And whether we'll be buried by the Chinese or somebody else that can do it better than us, that worries me a lot. That, China probably graduates 10 engineers every year to the one in the United States. I don't know whether that's a real number or not, but it's certainly on that order or greater. I've been to China and visited a number of universities, and universities you never heard of will have more engineering students than all of the universities in Utah combined. So they have it, it's a problem internationally that we really got to work hard to maintain our status as a world leader in earthquake engineering and in all phases of engineering. So these are some things that worry me about the future. There's a lot of political things that I worry about as well, but I'm not going to talk about that. But we are always in kind of a precarious situation because we don't know enough. We got to learn more, and then there is competition out there.
My immediate reaction is the recognition of value of what scientists and engineers do. This is in our public arena to the extent that science and even engineering are not valued or understood by the general population, or if we have a population for whatever reason that increasingly becomes anti-scientific in its views, I think the danger there is, what happens? Young people migrate into the world of financial services, for one thing. Astonishingly, if you look at the percentage of graduates from MIT at time that have gone from science and engineering to Wall Street, I mean, this is just astonishing. In the public realm also, this translates into available resources. I fear that we're going into an epoch that may be as long as a decade where, because of this penchant for deficit reduction and a reduction of allocation of appropriations to areas that in the political and public view don't seem to be worthwhile supporting, what this translates into is the jeopardy of funding. I mean, we can already see this at the National Institute of Health, and imagine how that percolates all the way down the chain from supported researchers to their laboratory assistants to student opportunities, postdoctoral fellowship opportunities that all vanish with this desiccating environment. This would be really worrisome to me.
Thanks. My name is Rob Snow. This kind of goes on the shoulders of Ryan Ma's question a little bit, but you know, a lot of people in the state have been focusing on seismic safety of schools over the years, and you know, we've made some strides within the last within the last few years. But I wonder, do you have any perspective on what it would take in the next decade or so to actually, you know, start to upgrade some of those schools and actually, you know, see the whole thing through?
One big earthquake. That would motivate some action. I think Utah has been fairly progressive in this area. We are doing a good job in a number of areas. Brent's here from the LDS Church, and I've been very impressed with the level of earthquake safety, the earthquake resistance that goes into structures they build. The I-15 system, I was on the seismic, and Jim Petchman as well, maybe Walt, I can't remember, for the state of Utah. Had a seismic advisory committee that sort of set out the guidelines of what they needed to do. And the state put first-class seismic resistance into those bridges. So there are some areas where we're doing a good job. Schools is another problem. The funding issue is difficult. Some districts have done quite well. I was on a committee for the Provo School District, and they looked through all of their schools, and I thought the study was well done. We didn't say you need to condemn a building and move right out of it, but we showed them where there were flaws in several of their buildings and said, now when you're doing some remodeling or have the opportunity, take that project on and get it worked on. So, but there really needs to be a public will, and one good earthquake would do more for the public will than anything I can think of.
That truly is the short answer. Here in Utah, putting things in perspective, when we look at the probabilities associated with a big one compared to California, clearly there's a lower rate of earthquake activity, a longer inter-event time. We live in an era where there are limited resources, competing urgencies, and I am convinced that anyone interested in making a difference, as I've said, in earthquake safety has to take the long view, be prepared to play the long game. And it really is remarkable the successes that have been made here in Utah, the level of earthquake awareness and the number of changes that have been made in the built environment that have made Utah more earthquake resistant. In the emergency response arena, in my view, particularly because of the experience of preparing for the 2002 Olympics, there was an application of resources, a change in culture among emergency responders, emergency managers, that is and then carried into the post 9/11 world. Earlier this year, I gave a talk on to the Seismological Society of America at a luncheon, and I came up with my explanation of how did Utah get to have such a relatively high level of earthquake awareness. And my short list for the successes to date had 4 items: a cohesive state earthquake program and partnering with NEHRT, particularly the USGS and FEMA, consistent messaging, this willingness to play the long game, and very clearly Utah's Mormon culture. And under the quiet leadership and behind-the-scenes work of the LDS Church, these have been big factors.
My name is Brent Maxfield. I've got a question for Dr. Arabasz. Let me ask a general question, then maybe a specific one. In terms of probabilistic seismic hazard analysis, when we're dealing with an area like the Wasatch Fault, which has primarily one major source with lots of smaller ones, if we look at a time, in the probabilistic, we assume a time-independent analysis where we just don't account for a time dependency. And how would a time dependency model affect ground motions as we look at something along the Wasatch Front?
There is currently a Utah working group on earthquake probabilities, and I can see Jim Peshman sitting at the edge of his seat. Probably has paid more attention in these meetings than I have to some of the resulting numbers. Would you venture an answer to Brent?
I can't answer off the top of my head how it would affect probabilistic ground motions, but I would like to comment on how you started out by saying that the Wasatch Fault was the one primary source. Way back in the 1990s, Suzanne Hecker took a look at the number of post-Bonneville earthquakes in the Wasatch Front region on various different faults, and found that about half of them have been on the Wasatch Fault and about half had been on other faults. Well, the working group on Utah earthquake probabilities looked at all these earthquake occurrences and came up with a very similar answer. So the other faults put together are as likely to generate large earthquakes as the Wasatch. The time-dependent calculation has an effect primarily for the Brigham City segment and the Salt Lake City segment, I believe, right? That's the ones where the elapsed time is on the order of the average recurrence time. For the other ones, it really doesn't make that much difference. And I don't know. The older probabilities for the Salt Lake City segment were something like 5 to 10% in the next 50 years for large surface faulting earthquake, and I'm not sure what they are for Brigham City. I don't remember.
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips.
Yeah.
They want to be free, Steve. Well,
So when you look back over your careers and all that you've accomplished, what do you think was your number one motivation for doing all this? What keeps you getting up in the morning and doing this?
remember I said that we each find our own niche. And when I became director of the seismograph stations, it was at a time when there was a NEHRP focus on the Wasatch Front in the 1983 to 1988 timeframe, and it was becoming very apparent that no resources were becoming available to modernize seismic monitoring in the state. And under the wing of Genevieve Atwood, I got involved in legislative hearings, creating a blue ribbon panel to look at the issue of updating seismic instrumentation. And as the process went on, and also there was sort of a counterpart process evolving and a national level with limited funding for seismic networks. And I just made a decision that what I was going to do with my time was to invest it in a way that future seismologists would not have to worry about stable funding for seismic monitoring. And I just dug in and got deeply involved both at the state and the national level. And at the national level, it took literally the better part of 20 years to gain success there, to get stable congressional funding for an advanced national seismic system. And that was one of my big motivators. And then, let's see, I was driven in part of self-interest in this realm of network seismology, but I became involved both at the state and the national level in panels and committees that were concerning themselves with broader earthquake issues, interacting with emergency managers, social engineers, they're out there too, social scientists, and my interest became broader beyond network seismology into the general area of earthquake risk reduction, certainly in Utah through the Utah Seismic Safety Commission, dealing with the whole 10 yards.
Well, I talked a little bit about motivation in my introductory remarks. I guess one of the things that motivated me, especially when I started taking money from the U.S. government, which I did in my graduate program, and particularly at the U.S. Geological Survey, I had a number of people in my local acquaintances come up to me and say, with some disparaging remarks toward government employees, what are you doing that's going to be of any value to us? And so that had some influence on me, but I've always felt that I'd like to leave the world a better place for me having been here. And that's motivated me to try to do things, solve problems. Much of the research that I've done has come from consulting and seeing what the issues that consultants are dealing with and saying, we can give you some help on that. And trying to do things that makes the world a better place. But I also felt that I deserved to give back to those who have sponsored me, the U.S. government and the LDS Church through BYU, to do good work to pay back for the great support that I've received from others in my career.
Steve, there are in this room some other professionals seasoned, and perhaps if there are any of them who have some words of advice to students, younger professionals, as they've listened to this and maybe have some point of view that's been missing here.
What motivates you? The thing that I really enjoy the very most is getting some test result that explores a phenomenon that no one else has seen before, and you're looking at it for the first time and you're going, does this make any sense? Is this real, or is this an error, or can we explain what's going on? And that's the thing that really excites me. And I would, if I had some advice to give, it would be, don't be afraid of trying something new. You sometimes get in a rut of I studied to be this. And then some opportunity comes along and it takes you right out of your comfort area and you feel nervous about doing it, but give it a shot. You usually don't have too much to lose, and you might find out that you're really good at this new area, or that that's something a little outside your specific calling, but you could make a real contribution in it. And so I would give it a whirl. There's a lot of exciting things that you might come across by doing that.
Brent?
Well, actually, I asked this question for 2 months in Norway as I sat in a tent. What am I doing? What am I doing here? Why am I here? Sometimes you get a chance to slow down a little bit in your career, do a few change of things, and I think that's the time we reflect. And I said, the basic thing that motivates me is I want to create something. It's just that simple. I want to create, whether it's new knowledge or create something that, I think I like to play the guitar now because, I had 2 months to practice in Norway too. But just to be able to create something. I think that's the way we leave our legacies, by what we create, what we leave behind us. Yeah, are there any other things? Well, we didn't get into the sticky issue, so we'll wait for that for next time, Doctor. Yeah, Dr. Arabasz. We'll get into the technical stuff. But I think it's been a good evening. I hope you enjoyed coming, and thanks for coming. And, on behalf of EERI, we, encourage you to continue to come to these. We'll do well to announce these. And if you haven't thought about joining our chapter, I would, think about doing so. We have lots of things planned throughout the next few years, and probably will repeat this and other things that we have. Let's see, upcoming events that we have. I'd like to put in a plug. I think it's February 3rd through 6th. Help me, UGS folks. Is that when we have the earthquake working groups scheduled? I think that's what I heard. I think it's close. So those meetings, there's different working groups that are involved. I think there's 4 now, I believe. 4 or so. And they'll put out announcements. I think you can get that from the UGS website. And, look at those working groups and go watch how these decisions get made and how they seek to probably accomplish some type of goal, whether it's a new map or whatever they're trying to do, and watch how they hash out the technical details. It's probably a little bit more messy than you think, but it's fun to watch. Okay? And let's see, I think, do we have a spring?
We are probably going to have a spring
activity.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about the short course.
Okay, go ahead.
The board has decided that we should sponsor a short course in earthquake engineering. And Kevin Franke is the chair of it. The decision was made to have it deal with the topic of liquefaction. And so we're trying to get this organized. We presently have it on the books to be roughly at the same time as the UGS meetings, earthquake meetings that Steve's talked about. Probably tied into the ULAG, the Utah Liquefaction Advisory Committee, is that right? Meeting, which will be one of those days. Probably be the day before or the day after. And so Kevin and I have been working on it. Bob Snow's also on this committee. And what we'd like to do is to get an outside expert to come in and talk to us about liquefaction. And so we've committed the expert. It's Liam Finn from Vancouver, British Columbia. Liam is a longtime associate of mine. He's got a wealth of knowledge. And but getting him committed and getting him to do something, I'm finding, are 2 different things. But Liam is presently working with the schools. He's from Vancouver, British Columbia, affiliated with the University of British Columbia, retired now. But he's working with the Vancouver schools to basically set up a code for the evaluation of seismic hazards in the schools. And liquefaction is a major issue. Vancouver has a lot of, that area has a lot of liquefied deposits. And so he is basically setting out a code for how to do liquefaction work. So what we're going to get is going to be largely based on what he's learning in doing this. And they're still writing up their things that they're doing. And he's going to send us an outline of what he wants to talk about here shortly. When we get a little better organized, we'll know we got a program and so on. It'll be basically an all-day short course somewhere in the Salt Lake area. Could be at UGS since they have facilities, but most likely somewhere else in the valley. But we'll keep you informed of that. We're trying to get it organized, and I do talk to Liam occasionally, and he's very anxious to do it, and I'm sure he's going to come through. We'd like to see some more work from him so he can be a little more confident of what we're doing. But that program will come off probably in early February. So look for that. Should be an excellent opportunity to discuss this topic, which has still got a lot of misunderstanding and lack of understanding that we need to deal with.
Well, I think with that, we'll end the roundtable. Thanks for coming. Let's give one last round of applause and thank these people for coming. Do you need an announcement too, Grant?
Can I just do an announcement?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm Grant Willis. I'm the new president of the Utah Geological Association. And you've talked, I think Randy or somebody made a mention about reaching out to the public. We're making a new initiative and real push to try to get the message out to the public. If you start to talk to the average individual up and down the Wasatch Front about what they need to do to prepare for the next earthquake, they want to store water, store peanut butter, right? Generally, the real problem that we see out there that we're trying to work on an initiative, and we would like to involve all of the different organizations that are involved, and that's why I wanted to make this announcement to you, is getting the message out to the people. The death tolls are going to be in the URMs, the unreinforced masonry buildings. It's basically the old houses and the old apartments where the deaths are going to occur in the next big earthquake. And that's what we are going to target. So I'm not here to make any kind of a sales pitch or anything like that today, but I just want to let you know that there's a new initiative starting up, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for a lot of people to be involved in this to try to take the message to the public. We actually have a budget. We're not strapped for cash, and we're going to be using that budget in some work on a new website, plus things like billboards and public service announcements and things like that, to try to start to get people thinking. I'll tell you very quickly, what really got me started on this was seeing a young couple invest their last dime to buy the house of their dreams, and it will not survive the next earthquake. Not being an engineer, I'm not going to tell you the location of that house in case I'm wrong, but it was a horrible choice for a young couple to buy this particular house, and it's happening over and over and over again. And so that's the kind of the target we're going to be doing in the Utah Geological Association. And you were asking about an opportunity to be involved. I think there's going to be an opportunity there. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this over the next year. I appreciate you. Let me do that.
Thanks, Grant. With that, I guess we'll close. Thanks again.